"You're just a janitor," Victor Cross said into the microphone, loud enough for every camera in the room to catch it. Someone near the front row laughed, the kind of laugh that comes easy when you already believe you know how the story ends. Maria Santos did not flinch. She looked past him toward the server room glass wall behind the stage and said, "I built the system you're about to launch." The room did not laugh again. 3 floors below, a warning light turned red. In 90 seconds, every payment terminal in the building would go dark. Victor did not know that yet. Maria did. 6 hours earlier, Maria Santos had no plans to say a single word to anyone that day. The city was still dark when she parked her 10-year-old sedan 2 blocks from Halcyon Systems, the way she always did, so the visitor badge scanner wouldn't flag an unfamiliar plate too close to the executive lot. She checked her phone once. A text from her daughter, Lily, sent the night before and never answered. "Good luck at work, Mom. You always fix everything." Maria smiled at the screen, then put the phone away, because the thing she loved most about her daughter not knowing what she used to be was that Lily believed the mother in front of her was already enough. She pulled her cart from the utility closet exactly on time, the way she always did, and began her rounds through a building she once knew as well as her own hands. Nobody at Halcyon Systems called her by her first name. On the schedule, she was simply cleaning staff, 3rd floor. She preferred it that way. The badge she wore now had no title attached to it, no history, no version number stamped beside her name, the way it once had been on a piece of architecture she had spent 4 years building from nothing. Maria moved through the hallways with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this so long the motion required no thought at all, which was exactly why she noticed the small things everyone else walked past. Tonight it was a cable. Not out of place enough for anyone else to see, but wrong in a way only she would recognize. It ran from an auxiliary panel near the server room into a junction box that had not existed the last time she'd studied this floor's schematics, years before anyone had asked her to leave. She set down her cart and crouched beside it, tracing the line with 2 fingers the way she used to trace circuit paths on paper, before anyone trusted her enough to touch real hardware. The connector was new, the rest of the panel was not. Someone had added something to this system in the last few days, and they had not documented it anywhere she could find. A junior technician named Diego passed by, balancing a stack of launch day signage. "Working late?" he asked, more out of politeness than curiosity. "This patch cable," Maria said, nodding toward the panel. "Do you know what it's routed to?" Diego barely glanced at it. "Probably maintenance. I reroute stuff all the time before big launches." He kept walking, and Maria understood, not for the first time, that a woman in a cleaning uniform asking technical questions was invisible, in a way that had nothing to do with her actual knowledge, and everything to do with what people expected a uniform to mean. She filed an internal maintenance flag through the building's basic reporting terminal, the only system she still technically had access to, describing the unlabeled connection as a potential security risk. Within 20 minutes, the ticket had been marked resolved by an account she didn't recognize, no explanation attached. She stood there a long moment, staring at the closed ticket, and felt something she hadn't let herself feel in 5 years. The particular, specific fear of watching a warning disappear before anyone with power had bothered to read it. By 8 that morning, the atrium had filled with investors, reporters, and employees gathered for the biggest day in Halcyon's history, the public launch of Aegis, the unified payment and identity security platform the company had spent 3 years and $40 million building. Victor stood at the center of it all in a tailored charcoal suit, rehearsing his opening line to a communications assistant, unaware that the platform's actual foundation had been designed by a woman currently pushing a cleaning cart past the coffee station 20 feet behind him. Maria had built Aegis's core architecture herself, back when the company was smaller and desperate enough to let a self-taught engineer, without a computer science degree, prove what she could do. She had designed the layered verification system that made the platform genuinely difficult to breach. The same system Victor was about to tell 200 investors his team had built from the ground up. She had not planned to be in this building the day they launched it. She had taken the janitorial contract 11 months earlier because it paid consistently and let her be home before Lily's bus arrived, and because after everything that happened, she had stopped believing there was a version of returning to this industry that didn't cost her something she couldn't afford to lose again. She approached the event coordinator, a woman she'd spoken to exactly twice before, and asked quietly if someone from engineering could check an unauthorized connection near the server room before the demonstration began. The coordinator, polite but rushed, said she'd pass it along. She did not. 40 minutes later, with the countdown clock on the main screen reading 4 minutes to launch, Maria tried once more, this time stopping the lead security officer directly. She explained, as simply as she could, what she'd found and why it worried her. The officer thanked her for her diligence and told her the technical team had already cleared the system for launch. Nobody asked her how she knew what she knew. Nobody thought to. At 2 minutes to launch, Victor took the stage, and Maria, unable to walk away from what she was certain was about to happen, moved close enough to the front to be heard. "The connection near the server room hasn't been cleared," she said, loud enough to reach the first few rows. "If that's routed into the verification layer, the whole platform could go down at launch." Victor turned, visibly irritated at the interruption, and found a woman in a gray uniform standing at the edge of his moment. "You're just a janitor," he said, and the room laughed with him, because that was the story his tone told, and stories that confirm what a room already believes are the easiest ones to laugh at. Maria did not lower her eyes. She looked past him toward the glass wall of the server room and said the sentence that would end the laughter for good. "I built the system you're about to launch. I designed the verification architecture that makes Aegis work at all. And if nobody unplugs that cable in the next 90 seconds, you're going to prove it in front of every investor in this room." Victor opened his mouth to respond, and that was the exact moment the first alarm sounded. The main screen behind him flickered, then split into cascading red warnings. Payment verification, failed, identity layer, unresponsive, security lockout initiating across all connected terminals. Somewhere near the back, a reporter's phone stopped filming the stage and started filming the screen instead. The engineering team, 3 of them, ran for the server room, and Victor, for the first time in the event, looked genuinely uncertain.
Maria did not wait to be invited. She walked past him, past the barrier separating staff from stage, and into the server room the security officer had assured her was already clear. Diego was there, frantically scrolling through logs he didn't have the context to understand. "It's not responding to any of our resets," he said, more to himself than to her. "Because your resets are talking to the verification layer through the front door," Maria said, already crouched at the panel she'd flagged 6 hours earlier. "This cable bypasses it entirely. Someone routed a shadow connection straight into the identity module, and it's flooding it with false authentication requests. That's why every terminal in the building thinks it's under attack." An engineer, older, skeptical, asked her how she could possibly know that from looking at one cable. Maria didn't answer with an explanation. She answered by pulling up a hidden diagnostic terminal built into the original architecture years earlier, one that appeared in no current documentation because Victor's team had rewritten the manual after she left and never known it existed. She typed a command sequence from memory, the same sequence she had written into the system's deepest layer during its very first build, and for a moment nobody in the room breathed. The false authentication requests began to slow, then stop. "How do you have access to a terminal that isn't in any manual we've ever seen?" the engineer asked. "Because I wrote the manual first," Maria said, "before someone decided my name didn't need to be on it." The engineer wasn't finished. He pulled up the shadow connection's routing history on a side monitor, hands shaking slightly. "This isn't just a bypass. It's pulling encrypted credential data out through an external port before the verification layer ever sees it. Someone built an exfiltration path into a security platform." He looked at Maria. "You said you flagged this 6 hours ago. Who closed your ticket?" Maria didn't answer right away. She was watching the fuel. "No, the data," she corrected herself silently. Old instincts from a different kind of system still surfacing under pressure. Watching the credential logs stabilize instead. "Whoever closed it had admin rights to a queue that shouldn't have existed without engineering sign-off," she said. "That's not a maintenance decision. That's a cover. Behind her, Victor had followed the commotion into the doorway, his rehearsed composure gone. He watched the warning screens behind him shift from red to yellow to a slow, steady green, watched 200 investors who had just seen his platform fail in real time, now watching a woman in a cleaning uniform bring it back from the edge with commands none of his highly paid engineers recognized. He did not say anything yet. He was still trying to understand what he was looking at. A voice cut through the crowd gathering at the server room's glass wall. "She's not guessing." Priya Nand, Halcyon's longest-serving security consultant, pushed her way to the front, badge still swinging from her lanyard. She had joined the company 2 years after Maria left and had spent most of that time quietly puzzled by gaps in the documentation nobody could explain. "I've spent 18 months trying to reverse engineer half of what she just typed from muscle memory," Priya said, loud enough for the investors pressing closer to hear. "There are functions in this system with no author listed, no changelog, nothing. Just work that was clearly done by someone who understood this architecture better than anyone currently employed here. I always assumed whoever wrote it was gone. I didn't know she was mopping the floor upstairs." Victor's jaw tightened. "That's enough, Priya, is it?" Priya didn't back down. "Because from where I'm standing, the only reason this platform isn't currently leaking every customer's identity data to an outside server is that the janitor caught what your entire engineering team missed." The truth came out slower than the crisis had, the way truth usually does. 5 years earlier, Maria had been the lead architect on Halcyon's very first security prototype, hired young, self-taught, and hungry. Back when the company was 3 rooms, and a dream that investors weren't yet sure was worth funding. She had built the verification system that eventually became Aegis's backbone, working nights and weekends while a colleague named Victor Cross, then a mid-level product manager with more charm than code, took credit in board meetings for architecture decisions he barely understood. When Maria took maternity leave to have Lily, Victor used the 11 weeks she was gone to quietly restructure the credit trail, listing himself as lead architect in every internal document, and by the time she returned, her badge no longer opened the server room door. She was told, gently and vaguely, that her role had been restructured out during a cost review. She had no lawyer, no savings for one, and a newborn who needed her more than a fight she wasn't sure she could win against a company that had already erased her from its own history. She never told anyone what she used to be. Not because she'd stopped believing it mattered, but because believing it mattered had already cost her everything once. Victor found her afterward, alone in the server room, coiling a spare patch cable the way she coiled every cable, out of habit rather than duty. "You could have told someone," he said. "Any time in the last 11 months, you could have walked into HR and said who you were." "And said what?" Maria didn't look up from the cable. "That the woman cleaning your office designed the product you take on stage every quarter? You'd have had security walk me out before I finished the sentence. You did it once already, Victor. You just did it more quietly the second time. You just called it a restructuring instead of a mistake." He didn't have an answer for that, not right away. "I didn't think you'd still be good enough to matter," he finally said, and it came out smaller than he meant it to. It had been 5 years. Systems change. "People change. The architecture didn't," Maria said. "It's still running on the bones I gave it, because nobody who came after me understood it well enough to replace them. You didn't outgrow my work, Victor. You just stopped crediting it." Investigators moved through Halcyon's records over the following weeks and confirmed what the server logs and design timestamps had already made clear. Maria's original architecture files, buried but never deleted, carried her authorship on every foundational document, timestamps years before Victor's name appeared on any of it. The unauthorized cable, it turned out, had been installed by a contractor Victor's team, hired to cut costs on a component Maria's original design had explicitly required for security reasons, a corner cut in the name of an efficiency report Victor needed to show the board before launch day. He had known about the shortcut. He had simply gambled that no one still working in that building understood the system well enough to notice. He had gambled against the one person who built it. Victor did not apologize on stage that day. Real accountability rarely happens under a spotlight, and Maria hadn't come back for an audience anyway. His apology came a week later, in a quiet meeting where he offered her the title he'd taken from her 5 years earlier, this time with her name on it from the start. Maria didn't accept the title alone. She asked for something the company had never had: a formal channel where any employee, regardless of title or uniform, could flag a safety or security concern and have it reviewed by an independent technical team before launch, not after failure. Anyone, Victor repeated, testing the word like it cost him something, including whoever's cleaning the break room at midnight. Especially them, Maria said. They're the only ones in this building who see it when nobody's performing for a camera. Victor agreed, because for the first time in 5 years, he understood exactly what it had cost the company to assume a warning wasn't worth hearing just because of who was speaking. He also agreed to something Maria hadn't asked for directly: a full audit of every credit line in every internal document going back a decade, so that no one else's name could quietly disappear from work they had done. Diego, the technician who had waved off her question about the cable, was the one who ran the audit. He found 2 more names buried under other people's titles before he finished the first department. That evening, Maria picked Lily up from school in the same 10-year-old sedan, still wearing her badge, the one that now read, for the first time in half a decade, her actual name and title beneath it. Lily asked how her day was. Maria said it was a good one and meant it. Not because the world finally saw her the way she'd always known herself to be, but because somewhere in that building, a system built to protect people had held, and it had held because she never stopped watching it. Even when no one thought to ask her to. Somewhere tonight, someone quietly doing work. No one thinks to credit is holding something together that the rest of us are only beginning to understand the weight of. If this story reminded you that expertise doesn't always come with a title attached, remember to look a little closer at the people around you before you decide what they're capable of.